supremacy. Now think about that. God is the supreme king, the supreme being. In fact, he is the only being. We all emanate from him. And because of that, he acts as if that's who he is, because that's who he is. And that's sovereignty as we go through. God is over all, above all, owns all, and he exercises that authority. Then we looked at God's sovereignty is universal. It is over everything. There's not one area, none. Sometimes most Christians will accept that, but what's the one they typically don't want to give God authority over? It's usually one area where people struggle. What's that? Their free will, man's will. They say God doesn't do that. Have you ever heard this one? God's a gentleman. He will never cause anybody to do anything. Well, guess what? God's not a gentleman. Can I tell you that? God's God. Okay? God's God. And he's the supreme being. Okay? So yes, he exercises his authority over all things. As he does that, we've never seen this on human sovereignty of a king, but he's also good, loving, merciful, gracious, all those things with his sovereignty, all together at once. All right, so he's universal. We looked at he's the ruler over all the kingdoms and all the individual leaders of those kingdoms. We looked at those. One thing you can do, and I'll keep this in mind, the fate of this world is not in government. Any government. None of it. Okay? All governments are there because God has placed it there. All leaders are there because God has put them there to accomplish his purpose. Okay? So, won't go into all great detail, but here's the bottom line. You don't have to be anxious about how the world's going. You don't have to be consumed with governmental issues. You don't have to do that. God's got it. God's got it. It's going and it's accomplishing in all the ways. And when he says, listen, buddy, you're done, he's done. And God's bringing in another one. Okay? But it's all done. And that's a worldview that we definitely need to have as Christians. Okay? And understand that and trust God in those things and not be anxious by whatever's going on. Jesus didn't seem to be real anxious about the Roman government when he was here. Paul, Peter, they really weren't anxious about all the... And the Roman government was a very corrupt, immoral government. God has them there for a purpose and a reason. All right. Then we looked at God saves the elect. God will save all that he has. He'll have compassion on whom he'll have compassion. Mercy upon whom he'll have mercy. He has compassion on who he chooses, and he hardens who he chooses. God's sovereignty extends over that. He determines man's life and destiny. Remember it says in James, we're going to be talking about when they get to that soon in the pastors. If you're going to go somewhere, you say, God willing. It's not that we have to say those words all the time, but that should be part of our thinking. We don't go anywhere, do anything, unless it's God is willing for that to happen. Otherwise, it will not happen. Do you understand that? In him, we live, move, and have our being. All that. So, everything, God's sovereignty is over. Here's what I like. Well, let's catch with the next one here. Let's put it with this one. We put nothing's outside his jurisdiction. We got even, when you cast lots to make decision, God is the one making that decision. He makes the lot go exactly where it should. He makes that decision. He controls lots. He controls dice. Everybody play the game aggravation? Ever played that game with marbles, and you go around, knock people out. We like to play that, Demeter, and we learned it when I roll it. Herb and I will pick the number, roll it, and knock them out, and then we explain to them that's God's sovereignty, that's God's providence. So, and of course that goes over real well. But then they turn around and do it to us. But all that, and when a sparrow falls to the ground, that's God. God is involved down to the very minutest of details. He has to be. Do you understand that? When God sets a plan from the very beginning of this world, if he is not in charge of every single atom, molecule, whatever goes down to the smallest, whatever, if he's not in charge of all that, he cannot guarantee his plan is going to take place. We can't trust him. He controls all of that down to the very minutest of details. Then this one, I want to read this one. I opened up Acts 4:27, 28. We read it last week, but I want to spend a little time here. For truly, in this city, there were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod, Pontius Pilate, along with the Gentiles, and the peoples of Israel. Did he miss anybody? Basically everybody. To do whatever your hand and your purpose predestined to occur. All those people, Herod, Pontius Pilate, the Jews, when the Jews shouted, Barabbas, be released. That was all part of God's plan, predetermined. When Herod, Pontius Pilate made all their decisions, it was all predetermined by God's plan. All that. Now here's my question to relate to you guys. Did Herod and Pontius Pilate seek God? Wisdom when they made the decisions? No. Couldn't care less. Now, and if I would have gone up, if they were here today, if you had them on top, and said, do you remember how God made you make those decisions? They would go, what are you talking about? I made that decision. God was nowhere involved. I didn't hear voices. I didn't hear anything. I did what I wanted to do. That would be their answer. Same with you and I. Do you make decisions day in and day out all through your life? Do you ever hear the voice of God? I never have. Okay? But every decision that comes about is by God's hand. Think about that. I make decisions. Sometimes I'm good about seeking God's wisdom. Sometimes I don't, I'll admit. That's not the way it should be, but I do. And there's times when I seek his wisdom, talk to people, do things, I still have no clue what's the right decision. You ever been there? Do that. But guess what? You made a decision, and you went on. That's the hand of God working every decision. Now, even sinful decisions. Now, doesn't mean don't hear me incorrectly. Oh, so God wanted me to sin. God did. Go back to Genesis 50:20. God meant it for good. They meant it for evil. When you mean something for evil, guess what? There's consequences. There's judgment. Either it's going to be judged by the blood of Christ or by you in hell forever. So don't make that lightly. But even that decision, God meant it for good. Even that sinful decision. It goes a lot. So when you're making a non-sinful decision, ever been there in your life? I remember I was a junior in college. I had to finally declare my major. You know, I kind of did around. I had to declare it. I was at Ashland University. I just switched to there from the branch at Ohio State. Went in, sat down with the counselor, kind of worked all through. I said, I figured it out. Computer programming. I want to be a computer programmer. They said, that's great. We don't have that. a minor here. Can't major in that. So what do? Well, I got 15 seconds. After all that, I go, accounting. Okay, so I picked accounting. Okay, I picked accounting in 15 seconds of my life. Okay. But look, I'm just going to, here's just a little bit of my, first of all, we're not smart enough to make decisions. You understand that? I hope you understand that. We're not smart enough to make all the decisions and know all the outcomes and where it's going to go. That's what God does. And I like math. I like figures. I like that kind of thing. It made sense. I didn't choose to be a plumber because God didn't gift me that way. I hate plumbing. I've done it and I hate it. For you plumbers out there, I salute you. But why was I good at math? Why do I like figures? I want an answer. God made me that way. Okay? So you see, so when I pick the desire of who I am and what I'm doing, I'm picking out of what God made me anyway, which is what he put me there for, and to do those things. It's all that, even the decision that I went to a school that didn't have computer programming. I didn't know that. Okay? All that. But what that does is that leads me to be an accountant, who leads me then to go be at a manufacturer in New London, Ohio, as a controller, $20 million company right out of college. I was working 55, 60 hours a week, didn't see my family. I left in the morning, they were in bed. I got home and they were in bed, my kids. I figured out pretty soon that probably not going to stay married if I continue that life. So I switched. I heard a school treasurer at Lucas. I'm going from a $20 million company, a controller, to go to be a treasurer at Lucas Schools. But I figured that, well, I'll at least see my family. So maybe that's more important. So I chose that. Ended up getting 2 years later the job at Ontario Schools, move out here, can't find a church out here for a year. My second grade daughter, who was Jill at the time, goes and stays overnight with a friend from school that she just met from coming there. The mother brings her back. It's Jackie Wood. If you know Jackie Wood here at church. Drops her off. I said, we got to talk about it. I can't find a church. He says, well, have you ever tried Westwood? I go, where is Westwood? I'd been here for a year. Didn't even know it existed. Started coming to Westwood. Changed my life. My wife cuts hair. She starts cutting the hair of this family that just moves into this area. My wife, if you know me, I'm kind of, my introvert is where I'm at. She comes home and says, hey, I invited this couple that I cut their hair. They're new in town. We're going to go out to eat. I'm going out to eat with people you cut their hair, strangers that I don't know. I go, thanks a lot. We go out, they become a very friends. It's Devin Herb Muncie back there. They have a boy in seventh grade. I have a girl in seventh grade. We end up becoming friends, going on vacations together. Jill has a different boyfriend every other week in seventh grade and eighth grade. I said, why don't you ever like the boys at church? What about Jeremy Muncie or something? And you get this famous girl line, oh, Dad. Like, come on. And, well, probably a month later, she liked Jeremy. Okay. I was in eighth grade, and now they're married. They stayed together in eighth grade, married, and now he's a senior pastor of our church. I couldn't have made any of those decisions to think of all this and all that it led and where it goes about and where it's going to go. You don't have to. You look at your decisions, all your decisions. Stay away from the sinful things. That's clear. Okay? That's a clear, easy. God never, ever says, here's sin, go do it. No. Stay away from those, but the non-sinful ones, God directs all those in the ways, and you trust him. You pray, ask for wisdom, ask for people around to make decisions, and then make your decisions and go. That's the sovereignty of God, and you trust. And then God works out all the details. And even if I had chose plumbing, God would have guided my life and directed to where it goes. That's the point of all this. I get so many people that are like, oh, I don't want to make the wrong decision. What if I make the wrong decision? What if I pick this? And God didn't want that. And what if I do this? And I don't know where I'm going to go. And get all worried. And what am I going to do? If it's sin, stay away from it. If it's not, pray to us. And then choose your desire. Because God's given you desires and what you do. And go on. And then trust him and all this. That's what sovereignty does. And you know that God's over that decision. Even all those things. God gives us the desires of our hearts. God made you the way you made. I'm a vanilla shake guy. Some people are a chocolate shake guy, right? Do that. Where does that come from? All that's God. It's universal over everything, down to the minutest of details. That's, I hope you get from that, one of this is to see that God is over all. This is his world. He is directing all things. He is bringing about his plan, and it will be accomplished. All right. Questions, comments, anything at this point? I want to keep moving. Yes. Oh, do we have a microphone guy? Would someone be willing to? Oh, over here, to Bill, the front.
So this is ultimately a question, but to explain why I'm asking the question is that relatively similar to like what you were saying about how things led to one thing to another, so on. When Kelly and I had decided to leave the church that we both grew up in, it was one of those types of situations where it was one of the, like, you were kind of trained, so to speak, to never even think such thoughts. So it would have never been anything that we would have ever talked about. But there was one particular day that we were driving together in the car, and I mustered up the courage to ask Kelly, if we were to ever leave the Bible Baptist Church, what would you think about that? And crazy to me that she actually was kind of open to the conversation. And when I said, okay, well, if you would be willing to do that, I said, well, what church would you think that we would go to? And she said that, well, for some reason, I can't get the Mount Sterling Baptist Church out of my mind. And what was so crazy is that I had been thinking along that exact same line for months, but never shared a word with it. And so in my mind, I guess I immediately thought to myself, because of we could not have orchestrated even the thought process that this has to be what God is wanting for us, because we weren't upset with anything, we weren't mad at nobody, we didn't have any issues or problems. We were the youth pastors of that church at the time, so we didn't have any reason to leave. But for some reason, something was unbeknownst to either one of us, in our hearts and in our minds, continuing. So my question is that, do you think that we can, like, recognize those things at the moment? And do you think that there's any dangers to that process of you're trying to evaluate whether this is what God is wanting you to do, or, I guess maybe it's along the same lines of what you're saying is that just make the decision and just go with it, and then that's God making the decision anyway.
This is very complicated. In fact, I did a whole 6-month class on it 15, 20 years ago. So it can take, this is a lot of stuff. But quickly, I think, was that the Lord doing that? Yeah. When I made my decision in 15 seconds to go accounting, was that the Lord? Yeah. That's the whole point of all this, is what I'm trying to say is, I don't think you have to look for something like that to make a decision. Well, I'm just not getting anything from the Lord. I mean, I really want this. It's not sinful. I think this would be really good. But the Lord's not giving me a neon flash anywhere that says do it. Well, you may not get those. That's fine. Most decisions are like that. Make a decision, desire your heart if it's not sinful. Talk to some people if it's a bigger decision, and get their input. Make sure you're not missing something. But go, and then trust the Lord. And when you make decisions, sometimes there's difficulties afterwards with that decision. And so I hear this a lot of times. God must be telling me I made a bad decision. Well, maybe, but don't use that as that it. Paul made a decision to go preach at all the different places around Greek, wanted to go reach all the lost. He got beaten, stoned, and jailed. I mean, after a while, you got to say, if you had that mentality, you'd say, Paul, do you really think the Lord wants you preaching? Look what he's doing. I think you should stop. I think he's telling you to stop. Was God telling him to stop? Absolutely not. Difficulties do not mean wrong way, though. Of course, if you look back, make sure it's not a sinful decision that's causing your difficulties. But there's a lot of times you make the decision the Lord wants, and there's difficulties. That's still his hand working through all those things. So it's very complicated through all this. But don't be paralyzed and looking for a sign. If you get a clear togetherness and sign of those things, I think that makes it easier sometimes to make those decisions. Sometimes there is nothing the Lord gives you. That doesn't mean he doesn't want you to do it. If that's still your desire, what you think you want, go on. And the Lord works all those out. Because our minds are controlled by God. I hope you understand. Sovereignty goes over that. The choices you like, who you are, what you want to do, what things that you're good at, all those things, all that is God placed in you for a purpose to accomplish his purpose. And as you go, make those decisions. And if you make a wrong decision, Jonah did, right? What do? What does the Lord do? A lot of times. He'll scoot you right back in. And now Jonah was kind of obvious it was God doing those things. We may just have something else that changes and moves us and goes on. The Lord, and when I say wrong decision, no decision you and I make was ever not written down in the books before the whole world began. Do you understand? Well, what if I make this decision and miss God's will? How do you miss something that is 100% certain? Do you understand that? God's sovereignty is 100% certain. He wrote it down before the foundation of the world, and there it is, and all things will go to his way. Every decision was written out. He didn't miss God's will. What we often talk about is it the best thing, or is it, of course, the sinful or not are clear, but there's no such thing as you making a decision that's not part of his plan. Now, there may be consequences that come from that are good for us to teach us to be more dependent upon him. All those things. But you didn't sit there and you should never have to sit there and go, if I woulda, coulda, shoulda. Okay? Your life is your life. It's written down in the book before it began. And what's the purpose of your life? Isn't it to hit the highest tax bracket you can? Get a nice, comfortable retirement, nice group of grandkids that all love the Lord, and I live comfortably, and at 102, I go to sleep one night and just die in my sleep and never know. I mean, there it is, right? Is that our goal? A lot of times it is. Even me, I do that same thing. But what's the goal of our lives? The Bible tells us to be conformed to the image of Christ. That's the goal of our lives. Okay, for whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he may be the firstborn among many brethren. That's the goal. So no matter what decisions I make, I don't care if I'm a plumber, I'm an accountant, doesn't matter. the goal is to be conformed. And I can do that when I'm a plumber. I can do that when I'm an accountant. I can do that if I live in Mansfield. I can do that if I live in Florida. Well, where should I live? What should I? Wherever you live, be conformed to Christ. Whatever you do, be conformed to Christ. That's our goal. That's what we do with our lives and all those things. We don't need to get wrapped up. So even difficult decisions that appear to be, well, it's there for a purpose to conform us to Christ. And so some of us have lives that you look at them and you go, wow, they don't seem to have much illness, much difficulty, and do this. And then others you look at and you go, it just seems one thing after another on those things. Those are God's sovereignty, but it's all to conform us to his Son. So no matter, you go, oh, I want to be the first one. That's our fleshly humanness. But the idea is if we really understand spiritual things, we want to be the one that whatever it is that makes us most conform to Christ. Because that's the goal. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could try and get close enough to you, but...
One thing I've noticed is sometimes we think certain people aren't going through much. And really, they're going through exactly what they need to be going through in order to be sanctified and conformed into Christ's image. You know, you'd be surprised as elders and pastors, we hear about what's going on in certain families, and you'd be blown away at the pain. And they may not have cancer like you, or they may not have a terrible tragedy happen in their family that's visible, but there may be extreme difficulty in their heart and life. So just keep that in mind always. The Lord knows what he's doing. He gives us all what we need, and he gives us enough.
And see, that's bottom line through all this is, hopefully in this class we go through as we talk about these things, is trust God. No matter where you're at, no matter what you're going through, no matter what decisions you made in the past, no matter wherever it is and this and that, you know and you can trust it's in God's sovereignty. You're in his hands. He's doing and allowing all different things in your life to conform you to him. And that's our comfort. That's our trust. Because he is sovereign over all things. There's no Satan out there sneaking things in behind, and God's got to clean up, and there's no evil person out there who God doesn't control his choices, and he just made a choice that was bad for you. Sorry. And God's trying to make it as good as he can. Okay. I hear that from so many different people. They might not say it quite like that. But that is not it. We can rest and get up every morning knowing I'm exactly where God has me today. I'm doing to look out. And all I need to do today is to focus on being conformed to the image of his Son today and having a relationship and honoring him today. No matter where you're at and what you're doing, no matter what situation. And we need to do that in every situation, even the difficult ones. That's honoring God. When we suffer even unjustly, we're called for that in all those ways. So I'm hoping that this is easy to talk about. This is, whenever you see me, you need to remind me of what I just taught you. Because we all forget those things and need reminded. All right. Okay. Let's move on. We're finally going to start class. God's sovereignty is absolute. It's absolute. So it's not just universal over all things. It's absolute. His authority is unlimited, unrestrained by anything. He is not subject to his creatures or influenced in any way by them. Can someone help me real quick? Let's get Psalm 115:3. Can we just have some hands real quick? Good. 135:6. Psalm 135:6. Jared, would you do that for me? Isaiah 46:10. Wendell, 10 and 11. Jeremiah 27. I want to do 5 and 6. Paul. All right. How about Job 42, 2? Let's get that. Okay. And Daniel 4, 34 to 35. Last one here. Oh. Brad, do you have one? All right. Daniel 4, 34, 35. All right. God's sovereignty is absolute. Listen to these things. Psalm 150. Oh, do you have a microphone? To who's first? Oh, down here. Oh, front, down to your left. Right here.
Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases.
He does all that he pleases. Go on. What's the next one? Jared.
Psalms 135:6. Whatever the Lord pleases, he does, in heaven and in earth, in the seas and in all deeps.
Yes, God does his pleases. Some people say, well, he doesn't do all of what he pleases on the earth. In heaven, yes, but not on earth. No. The Bible's very clear. I don't care where you go. God does whatever he pleases. Nothing restrains him. All right, what else we have? What's the next one? Whoever's next. Isaiah 46.
10 and 11. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. From the east I summon a bird of prey, from a far-off land, a man to fulfill my purpose. What I have said, that will I bring about. What I have planned, that will I do.
Can't get clearer than that. God made a plan, set it out, I will accomplish it. Nothing's going to do it. If I need a man, if I need a bird, doesn't matter what it is, it'll be done. I will accomplish all mine. And I often hear sometimes, well, God didn't really want the fall. He didn't know if it was going to happen or not. And he just, no. God planned it. It's all part of it. And it's all accomplished in his plan. Yes.
I have recently been made aware, drinking coffee, whatever, with guys I've met that are unbelievers, how utterly foolishness this is to them.
Yes.
They just can't comprehend how anybody could believe, because they're the captain of their ship, and they absolutely count on that.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how you're witnessing, talking, visiting, whatever, they just shake their heads and say, how could any, as you mentioned, the elections and all the things that are coming up, and how people get so emotionally attached and involved with all of this, and stressed over all these things. And boy, when we can rest on this doctrine, if you would, or this absolute belief system, it does disclutter or uncomplicate our lives. It has the potential to do, if we will let it do that.
Exactly right. And the key thing is, as much as you and I try, none of us are smart enough to run this world. And God is, and he does. And he says, I got it. I do all that I please. I do all that I planned. Okay? We just sometimes look and go, surely God didn't plan this. But he did. God planned everything for a purpose. For a purpose. And it doesn't care, he really doesn't care if we know all the purposes. Because, first of all, we're not smart enough to do that. Second of all, he's got it. We can trust him. So, that's the question is, do you believe that? When I say believe it, live that way. Not just know it. Where else do we stop? Jeremiah? Who's that? Paul?
It is I who by my great power and my outstretched arm have made the earth with the men and animals that are on the earth, and I give it to whomever it seems right to me. Now I have given all these lands into the land of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and I have given him also the beasts of the field to serve him.
Yes. All those lands, all that, God says, I own it all. I give it to my one. I give it to Nebuchadnezzar. If you talk to Nebuchadnezzar early on, he said, God did what? I did it. In fact, he did say that. And then he got to walk around like a beast for 7 years. So he figured it out. You didn't do this, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? God did it. And then he said, that's right. I know that now. Okay? But you ask Pilate, Herod, Nebuchadnezzar, us. We go, no, I made that decision. I hope it was what God. No, God was directing that. Well, I didn't hear it, I didn't feel it. God directs our decisions. Yet we're still responsible. I'll keep throwing it out there so you don't forget. How do you do that? Doesn't matter. We're going to talk about that later. That's coming up on the next page. All right. No one can prevent him from acting or altering his plans. Job 42:2. Okay.
I know you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted.
No purpose of yours can be thwarted. Do you understand that? Let's read it one more and then we'll. Daniel 4:34-35.
At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, as he does according to his will, and among the hosts of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say, what have you done?
Do you catch that part? It says, all the inhabitants of the earth, 8 billion people, if they all rised up and said, can't happen. I'm not going to do what you want. It's nothing. I will have my plan accomplished because they will do what I have told them and what I predetermined to do in that way. So no one, nothing can thwart his plan in any way. In any way, Nebuchadnezzar was a very quick picture. The most powerful man on earth when he lived. He was put down and taught, not you, buddy, it's me, God doing this. Okay? Most powerful man on earth, let alone the rest of us that aren't the most powerful people. Okay? So, the last thing I just want to, we'll move on from this, is no man can ever derail what God's plan is. Bible's very clear, we've read that, but I want to pound that in there and we all get that. No person ever. So if you have somebody that just seems to be messing everything up in your life or doing things and all that, no person is thwarting God's plan. It's part of his plan. So we trust. And that's, I don't understand, put it that way. I'm not saying you ever understand it, but you know it is that, and you trust it from God. God doesn't care if you fully understand why things are. He says, that's my job. I'll take care of that. But you just need to trust. And that's everything, anything that can happen. All right. God's sovereignty is eternal and immutable. It cannot be ignored, rejected, changed, usurped, or extinguished. Exodus and Psalm, if you want to read those, just tell you, it basically says God's kingdom is forever and ever. Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
The Lord shall reign forever and ever. That was Exodus. Okay, what was Psalm 145:13. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures throughout all generations.
There it is. So this sovereignty of God never ends, never stops, never winds down. It's forever, ever, ever. So all that we're talking about here is it's universal, it's absolute, and it is eternal and immutable. Two things. The last, we'll catch these, and then we'll we'll end there. To the believer, God's sovereignty is the greatest comfort. I hope you understand that, and I hope that's what you get through this. Like we talked, it's great comfort. No one can mess with us. Do you understand? No one can. That God's hand is not right there saying, yes, this is to be. And if it's not to be, it will not. So everything that happens, that's what I trust. I don't have to understand it, but I know I can trust it. That's what we have. Yeah. Morgan.
I think I was just thinking too, like, I think so often in my life, like, I go to one side or the other where I'm like, dang it, if I would have just been a better person and stayed in the will of God, and what's, you know what I mean? And I'm either like riddled with anxiety and on like not trusting the Lord that he really is in control, or I swing over to this other side of like, well, it's in God's hands and I just need to trust him, and then I just kind of be stagnant. You know what I mean? And I'm not, and it's like, I think sometimes trusting the Lord, it's actually a lot more practical than we think it is. It's not like, you know what I mean? Like, I tend to be like, oh, it's this abstract, like, peace that's just gonna, and like sometimes, right?
Sometimes, but yeah, that's not the measure.
Right, but it's like a lot of times it's like, I'm gonna trust the Lord in this moment that he's making me like Christ, and now I'm gonna do the next thing. Like, and now I'm gonna like use the wisdom that he's given me of, am I like being in his word? Am I asking trusted, wise people in my life, you know, because the Lord places those people in our life, you know what I mean? So I don't know, and maybe you can speak to that some, because I feel like I hear that so much a lot of times, especially going through hard times where it's like, it's almost like a, well, can't do anything about it because God's sovereign over this thing in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Remember what I said, when I said before, some people tolerate God's sovereignty, and some people trust God's sovereignty. And there's the difference. The first one you just talked about is tolerating it. You know, can't do anything, just here it is, I'll just hit me again, do whatever. No, that's not trusting. Trusting is honoring. Paul's thrown in prison, and he sings praises to God. That's trusting God's sovereignty. Okay? When I find myself in a difficult situation, I know that there's no place else to go but God. So I go to him. I can tell him my struggles. That's part of trusting God and all those things. And having a relationship. That's what you do with friends. That's what God should be with us. That's trusting God in his sovereignty, honoring him. Even in the midst of this difficulty, I still will praise him. Rejoice in all things. Okay? Trusting. That's the difference on all those things. So, the sovereignty, and I guess this next statement says, through the most difficult circumstances or severe trials, we believe that sovereignty has ordained them and governs them and sanctifies us through them. And there's the key. When I trust God in the difficulty, in the situation, and I honor him, I stay true, I don't shake my fist and why are you doing this type thing, okay? But I trust him that he's God, I'm not. He's got a plan for me in this. I'm going to trust him. I don't understand it, but I'm going to trust him in this, and I'm going to still praise him, honor him, worship him, and go about my life. You know what that does? When you do those things, that sanctifies us. That conforms us to the image of his son. Jesus said, not my will, but your will be done. That's Christ. We need to do the same thing in difficult situations. Not my will, but your will be done. I know this is part of your will for a purpose in that, so I'll trust you in this. That's trusting in sanctification. And that's different than knowing God's sovereign. Then you got to trust his sovereignty. Last one, we'll just read this so I can start clean next week. That's the believer side. To the unbeliever, God's sovereignty is one of the most despised attributes. We talked about that. To them, God can do or be anything he wants, except sit on his throne. You don't rule and reign over me. I am the captain of my life. He should be there to provide something. You see, I mean, hey, God, I know I don't talk to you much. Jesus comes. I know, do this, but if you could just do this one thing for me, okay, type of thing. Okay. And then if God does that, it's, okay, now go away. Go away. And when I need something else, I'll come back. So that's this. They don't not. Sovereignty is not a doctrine that is cherished at all by unbelievers, but it should be cherished immensely by us as Christians. Give us great comfort, great trust, and I like to put it this way, it's a firm standing to put your feet on when difficulties and trials come. I don't understand this. I don't know what's going on. All I know, Lord, is I can just stand on your promises and know that you're in control. And I trust you this. That's I call standing on the rock around me when I don't know what anything else is going on. That's what we're called to do. That's what God wants us to do. That's why he brings this stuff about in our lives, so that we do that and learn those things in our lives, because that is being conformed to the image of Christ.